welcome to this week's episode of our Grace podcast. It is so great to have you with us. If you have been watching throughout our series of Move That Mountain, it is so great to have you with us again this week. If it is your first time joining us, it is so great to have you with us. We are going to be talking about treasure this week, so you've joined on a good week for that. I'm so excited today to be joined by Marc Poree. Marc is our Ballito Campus Pastor, and I'm sitting in one of his beautiful offices in our Ballito Campus, South Africa, which is out in the middle of nowhere, but really pretty. So Marc, why don't you let us listeners know a little bit more about you?
Yeah, it's really good to be here. It's good to join with you guys. What can I say? I've been married 30 years this year to my high school sweetheart, Mans, and we've been in ministry for 30 years this year. And we have two kids, my daughter Em, who's 24, going on 25, and my son Caleb, who's 22, going on, I didn't think about that, going on 23. And absolutely love what God is doing in this place. So it's good to be here.
Great to have you. And a little crib note there is that Caleb, Marc's son, has just gotten engaged. So we're very excited about that. Yes, have a wedding on the cards. It's always great. So Marc, as we're talking today, as I mentioned, we're talking about treasure. And treasure is another word for like our money and our possessions and things like that, which is quite a difficult topic to be chatting about. It's never wanting to be heard, and it's never wanting to really be spoken about. So don't fret, those who are watching and listening in. We are not going to be giving you instructions on how to tithe or how to spend your money. We're just going to be having a chat today about heart attitudes and principles and practices that we can apply to money and just to the giving side of things in life in general. So Marc, what I'd love to know is with you and Mans, you guys have been handling finances for 30 years together. What has been some of the principles and practices that you've put into place within your marriage that has been setting you up well?
I certainly don't feel like an expert in this area, and it feels like the goalposts are forever moving. But I think one of the primary principles that we've kind of based things on is that everything we have is God's, and the lens that we filter our financial kind of stewardship with and our planning has been this idea that God's called us, and what He's given us is to fulfill that calling. And that's really helped us then kind of get some kind of consistency and honesty to the process, because I think we can con ourselves or build us ourselves into decisions. You know, it's hard to sometimes discern your own motives. And that's really helped us hold this thing together. And then also bring faith into that picture, because I don't think you can speak about money without speaking about faith and from a godly point of view.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, having faith, how do you feel that faith ties in with having money as well? Where is that connection coming?
Well, I think you can't be obedient to God without exercising faith. And we often talk about something like the tithe. And I think the tithe is an opportunity to exercise faith, because for most of us, when we look at our budget, we say, well, we've got X amount and we need all of it. Normally we need a bit more than what we think we're getting in, And so to take 10% out of that, that's a faith step. That's not a ticking a box or just trying to keep God happy. That it's got to be more than that. And so for me, faith, the moment we talk about faith, we talk about relationship, because faith is not in a concept or in an ideology or in some kind of belief system, but faith's in a person. It's in Jesus, So the moment we talk about faith and money, it becomes personal. And that for me is what allows us to really trust God and invite God into every part of our financial journey, because we're putting faith in Jesus, not into our wisdom or into how much money we have.
I think that's critical as well, because it's very easy to put faith in money because it's tangible. So I know I've got 1,000 rand, and so it's easy to know what I can do with it. But when it comes to the fact of I've got 1,000 rand and I need 2, or I've got 500 rand and I need 1,000, the faith step has to come in at that point.
Absolutely.
How did it go then when you're bringing up Caleb and Emma, when you're needing to chat with them about finances? When did you start having those conversations? How did you try and instill in them the principles that you and Mandy have abided by?
Yeah, so we've we made a decision in ministry as pastors that we would try and present an honest picture, not a perfect picture. And one of the ways we did that was inviting our children into every part of our lives. So obviously when they were little, we didn't put a burden around finance on them, but we did share the victories, and we did include them in the prayers of trusting God for things.
Great.
And so as soon as they began to receive pocket money and things like that, we began to teach them and invite them and encourage them to bring their offering on a Sunday to church, to be generous with what they had. And later, obviously, that became more and more detailed. And as young adults, they both believe in tithing. They have a conviction around tithing. They love the church and they love God. And so it's been great to see. It's actually quite exciting to see their own journey, because I think each person has a unique journey.
Yeah.
But we started very, very young, and we made it fun. It wasn't a heavy thing. It wasn't a burden. It was always fun. You know?
How do you make it fun?
Well, I think we tend to. It was good advice we were given by an older couple, around just ministry and church, and so we realized that when things are fun, people tend to want to do them.
Definitely.
And so they discovered at a young age the joy of blessing someone else, and the joy of saying, God, will you help me, and praying for things and seeing some of those breakthroughs come through. So that's where the fun aspect came. So when we would see a breakthrough, we would share that with them and say, hey guys, we're going on holiday because God's answered our prayer, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, sure. That's awesome. Yeah. That's very cool. And we all love fun. It's definitely a motivating factor for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to know, a lot of the time when it comes to money and possessions, our treasure as such, there's often a bit of a fear, a bit of an anxiety of, well, I want to trust God with it, and I want to be able to have a generous and a giving heart for those around me. But what if I already know I'm scrimping and I'm battling with money? Like, how do you work with that kind of a situation?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's two sides. There's the practical side of if we don't plan, if we don't know where we're trying to get to, we're not going to do the hard discipline things now and create the margin and create the opportunity. I think you got to plan for opportunity to be generous.
Sure.
I don't think it just happens. You might desire it, but unless somewhere you have to marry the desire to be generous with some practical points, and so I think that's part of it. I think the heart side of that is also being confident in your relationship with God, knowing that God said that He will take care of us, and there's no limit to Him and as a source.
Yeah.
So when we look at our salary, when we look at our earning, when we look at our employer or the government, whoever, we're always going to have an element of anxiety and fear around our finance, because that's not a good source. It's not an absolute. Where when we look to God, we can trust that He is able. And my experience is that when we do that we see Him doing the miraculous. We see Him giving us wisdom about things, helping us with our own discipline in that journey.
Yeah.
So I can't look at money or talk about financial planning or any of that without really looking at my relationship with God, because that's what frees me to be generous, to step out in faith. And it's also what gives me a conviction to say, okay, I'm going to say no to me now so that I can say yes to someone else or yes to God later.
Sure, so good.
And I think that's the planning part. If we can't say no to us now, we will never have the opportunity to say yes to God and to others later. And so that's sort of kind of been foundational for us in our journey.
Yeah.
Not that we always get it right.
No.
We're
human.
But I think that's always a measure for me. When I see an opportunity now, I can't respond, I realize, hang on, there's something wrong in my process.
And it is, like how you're saying about me and with God, we don't often see that within ourselves. We don't find ourselves feeling selfish or feeling like we've been greedy. When it comes to our own spending or what we want to do with our money.
Yeah.
So I think it's really practical to say that we need to plan to be generous.
Yeah.
It's like we say, you've got to plan to put the tithe first. You don't, do those kind of things if I have anything left over,
absolutely.
kind of thing. Yeah.
I think on that, so most people would say, I wish I had more money so that I could give more money. And I love Andy Stanley's approach of percentage giving, because I spent 15 years traveling around Central Africa and working in very poor communities in South Africa. And I realized that generosity's got nothing to do with how much you have. Because some of the most generous people that I know fall in both the very wealthy category of and absolute poverty. And it's an attitude of heart. So I do think that we sometimes live under, we kind of take on a lie that's not true, and that becomes a lid on our giving, as opposed to having an attitude that says, God, I'm going to be generous because it reflects your nature. So what have you given me? And the moment we do that, faith is activated, because generally it means there's going to be a sacrifice. And I think that's when things get exciting financially.
Exciting. I don't know if I would have used that word. I would love to know, you and Mans have had 30 years going through all of this stuff. How have you managed the difficult question and the difficult heart attitude of having money and not letting money have you?
Sure, yeah. Okay, it's a good question. I think in any marriage, money can be, and for most marriages, is a little bit scratchy at times and can be difficult, or sometimes it's a massive issue. And I love the question, because I think for me, one of the things that's really helped us as a couple in dealing with financially difficult conversations around finance has been, when we come together, we're not coming together as around, am I right or is she right? Or did I make a good decision or bad decision, or whoever. But it's, how does this honor God? If our starting point is that everything we have, God has given to us, and our starting point is that we answer for the way we steward that and the way we use that, then when there's a conflict, we should go back to that place and say, hang on, God, are we honoring you with this? And part of the honoring is, it's both in our the way we resolve that and the way we steward it, but also the way we engage with each other. Because it doesn't help we're making great financial decisions, but we trashing our relationship in the process. So that's been a protection for us, because it kind of takes out the opinions of our opinions, and generally I think we make better decisions, because we come together in a place of saying, okay, we're in a bad place because we made bad decisions, and whoever made that, we need to own that together, it's ours. But actually, I'm not fighting to prove I'm right. I'm not saying, God, how do we honor you? How do we bring back, align our finances and our hearts and our motives with you? Because then we know there's going to be blessing, and it works. It doesn't mean that we're going to be an overflow of money, but it does mean that it works and we enjoy what God's given us.
And
I think that's one of the big things for me. Whether you have lots or little, we should enjoy what God has given us and entrusted us with.
I totally agree, definitely. And I mean, it kind of always been, as you say, all marriages have conflict, and it's never smooth sailing, especially with finances. There's so much conflict around the topic in general, let alone within a relationship with finances. If you don't mind sharing, perhaps if you and Mans have ever had a conflict around finances, or you weren't on the same page with finances, if there's any practical little tips, even just one little tip about how to kind of manage that kind of a conflict to do with like finances and the heart posture around that.
I mean, we absolutely have. I don't know if there's anybody that doesn't have those sort of conflicts. Depending who you're asking. I think obviously any of those conversations, there needs to be humility, and we got to be reminded of that. I think one of the things that's been helpful for us in dealing with not just financial conversations, but particularly is understanding what this makes the other person feel like. Because what's true of money is that for one person, and you might have this in a marriage, where for one person, money is what makes them feel secure. It's a security thing. And for another, it's what makes them feel important. It gives them status. It makes them feel recognized. And so and for most people fall into one or both of those at some point, and that informs the way the car we want to buy or the money that we want to give away, And so when we understand what drives that, Mans and I we've driven very differently. Our fears I don't really fully grasp fear, to be quite honest. It's probably some emotional deficiency or something, but I'm not an anxious or fearful kind of person. And though Mans and I both we love the idea that we challenge our faith and want to really honor God with our faith, we both are moved differently with stuff like that. And so I think when you recognize that, if I'm saying to Mans, we should give away this money, or we should commit to this spend, knowing that what that may be creating as a fear in her helps us then to resolve it, because I realize she's not just saying your idea stinks and I don't trust you, or I think it's a stupid idea. But it's actually it's causing an emotion that is really hard to take a hold of. And I think that's been one of the helpful processes. For me, I tend to be a little bit overly spontaneous and overly what's the word, kind of bold. I can't think of the right word to right now, around money. And so I've often needed Mans to just say, like, hang on a second, is this wise? Because I've made some bad financial decisions over time like that. And I think just understanding each other's, like, the emotion of it, what is it actually doing in you, and then why, and then let's deal with that first. So say it's a fear situation. For me, the way to approach it again is, let's go back to, okay, who is our source? Do we need to be anxious about not having? Well, no. It might still be a stupid idea, so we shouldn't do it. But let's deal with that stuff first, Or for me, maybe I'm saying, I'm wanting to spend the extra money on the car because I actually think people are it's going to give me people are going to look at me differently.
A status change.
Yeah, it's a status issue. And none of us want to own that stuff. None of us want to admit that maybe that's our motivation. But hey, I think it is. Especially for us South Africans, there's certain things that trigger that stuff.
For sure.
So that's helped us in the conversation of, let's get beyond this initial conflict, and then it's easier to go forward again from there.
Sure, brilliant. Honestly, some really helpful tips. I think when it comes to finances, we can never know enough. No matter who we are, no matter how long we've been looking into it and diving deeper. So some really practical tips that I'm sure someone will be able to take away something, if not someone like me who takes away everything. So what I'd like to know is, just in closing, if you maybe have one takeaway that you would like our listeners to be able to go into the rest of their week or month or year with, that you'd like to share.
Sure. I think maybe I'll mention something before that. I think one of the things that I found to be really helpful, and I find it really difficult to do, is to bring accountability into the financial conversation. Accountability with my spouse, but also to invite other trusted advisors into the space, because I think so often we look at our finances and we can't see we just can't see a way through. But when somebody else looks, they don't look at our money emotionally. They just look at it with rands and cents. And so often someone else can see very obviously what we need to do to help us beyond. So accountability is massive, and I'd really advise that. But on a broader, we're speaking hard things, and there's much wiser financial people around certainly than me. But I think on a heart issue, I love this picture, and this kind of sums up, I think, my approach in having finance and being generous, because I think being generous with what God's given us really does reveal the nature of God. And there's this moment in Jesus' journey where he's at the house of this religious leader and these self-righteous people, and this woman comes in and she has a bad reputation, and she falls down at his feet. She has no reason to be there. And she begins to weep, and she weeps on his feet. She begins to wash his feet with her tears and wipe his feet with her hair. And then she takes this jar of perfume, this really expensive jar, and she begins to anoint his feet with it. And Jesus honors her for this. And whenever I consider that picture, it's the most extravagant generosity. It's this extravagant response to God. And I think when we're reminded of who God is, and that everything we have and everything we are really belongs to God and exists for God's pleasure and for God's purposes, that frees us. It's a liberating idea. It frees us to be generous. It frees us to be worshipful. It frees us to trust God with everything that He's given us. And so my encouragement in the whole process of dealing with finance is not for it to be something that weighs us down, but that it might be a tool in our hand that we use for the extension of the kingdom of God. It's something that we use, that when we give to others and when we give to God, God smiles. And for me, that's the desire of my heart, is that God would look at my life and smile. And so I'd encourage you just to remember that extravagant picture of saying, God, let me give sacrificially, with freedom, not with burden, but with freedom, knowing that this touches your heart. And God always meets us in that place.
He does. Yeah, you're right. Sure, that's beautiful. Really awesome. I love, because it's imagery. Yeah. And we always learn so well from imagery as well. So I think that's beautiful, Mark. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining with us as well today. It was so nice to have you. Nice to have representation from the north of Durban as well, which is always good.
It's good to be here.
It's almost a different temperature up this way as well.
Yeah, so. It's closer to heaven.
Thank you so much to all of you who are tuning in today to today's episode. Don't forget to catch 10 with Tom on Thursday, our Sunday services on Sundays. Otherwise, we will catch you next week for our podcast, and we look forward to seeing you then. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.